Okay, welcome everybody in the group. You know me by now. I'm Erica Jasper. I have a 12-year-old kiddo with executive functioning deficits and anxiety. And I started this group because our journey's been tough and I want to try to get you information as early in your journey as possible and connect you with amazing resources as easily as possible. And tonight we have another one. This is Dr. Brianna Mady. She's the founder of Open Mind Psychological and a clinical psychologist. And she has 13 years plus of experience in community mental health. And recently she was vice president of clinical services for the Child Guidance Resource Centers. Amy, I don't have an intro for you, but you can do it when it gets to you, or Brianna, you can introduce Amy, but we're also joined by Amy, who will be doing some of the chat tonight. So we're super grateful for you both sharing your time and your knowledge, and I will kick it over to you so we can just get started.
Awesome. Thanks for having us, Erica, and everybody on here. We've recognized a few names, so good to see everybody. So Amy is my partner at Open Minds. She also is the Chief Clinical Officer at Child Guidance Resource Centers. So we're really excited to partner up today and talk about anxiety because it's an important topic for all of us, whether we're adults, kids, parents, anybody in between. So let's get into it. So our presentation is interesting because we call it internal alarms, understanding anxiety and supporting anxiety. And really, as we get through here, I'm going to tie back to that internal alarm. So tonight we're going to really be talking about what is anxiety, how to recognize anxiety in your child, what keeps it going, how best to support your child with regulating their anxiety and provide some resources for you. And Erica will obviously is recording this will go out, but we'll also share our slides. So in case something really sticks with you or a visual could be helpful for you, please feel free to share, use. We're all about making sure that word gets out there and everybody gets the support that they need. So in terms of what is anxiety, so I referenced, that internal alarm. So anxiety is basically our internal fire alarm going off. It's our internal sense of worry, that dread or fear. It may or may not have a clear cause. It can be a typical response. Could include worries, phobias, panic, social anxiety, trauma reactions. So oftentimes this visual is just a good one. So it's like our body having this fire alarm going off. It's telling our brain, hey, get ready for action. Something's happening. Something bad could be happening. And that's where we get that where for many of us have heard that fight or flight response there. So that's that physiological kind of alarm going off, telling us something, there might be real danger. And when anxiety is not helping us or not serving us or happening during times that there is no real danger, that's when it's a false alarm, which kind of shows here in that visual where the alarm's going off because the toast got burnt. That person didn't have a good breakfast that day, but that really wasn't a real alarm, right? So it was a false alarm, and there really wasn't a actual worry that was there. So what happens with anxiety? So our body has that reaction once we are triggered by something. Triggers, as we just referenced, can be something real, could be something perceived. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But that trigger sends off our body reaction. Our body reactions then impacting our thoughts. So that thought of panic or dread, or I'm not going to be able to do this, or I don't know how to do this. And which is then going into that last piece of the triangle, that action. And often our action when we have anxiety is that fight or flight. So we're either getting really ourselves kind of ready to go and kind of really tackling something. We can be more aggressive in the way that we might tackle that, or a child might tackle that, or we could be avoiding it. Oftentimes, again, what anxiety looks like in a child could be just avoidance and not wanting to go to school, not wanting to go to that birthday party, wanting to go in the house when they see something that is making them feel uncomfortable because they want that fire alarm. They want that alarm to turn off, right? So they want to put out that really anxious feeling and uncomfortable feeling that they're having. In terms of how to recognize it in your child, so anxiety, especially in kids, can look like a lot of different ways. As we get older, it has more of a similar pattern to it, but with children, it does can look like a lot of different things. It could look like very explicit expressing fears and worries. It could look like crying and not being able to express ourselves and use words, but crying during times that we're not really sure why there's tears or fears because we're not able to express it. It could look like oppositional behavior. There's often times where we have a question for an evaluation and it ends up being that the child's not being oppositional. It wasn't a conscious choice to not choose to do something. It was really this uncomfortable feeling and really this dread that was coming out for that child, and that the behaviors were as a result of that feeling and not being able to express it in their way. It can come out as silly and goofy. Sometimes the class clown, he or she, might actually be really feeling anxious and not knowing how to navigate their social world any differently. So the behavior ends up being kind of silly or goofy or kind of dysregulated behavior. More of a typical response might be antsy or fidgety or difficulty concentrating. So there will be times where there might be a question from a teacher that says, I've noticed that Johnny's been a little bit, has really trouble sitting still during math or reading. And I'm noticing them not staying on track. I wonder if there's something going on with their attention. When we look at that further, that kind of nervous or anxious or fidgety behavior isn't necessarily, a lack of concentrating or difficulty concentrating, but it's really just feeling uncomfortable, which is then, impacting their concentration. It could be self-doubt, kind of fearful or clingy behavior, sleep disturbance, repetitive thoughts or questions. So we might see that kind of repetitive question loop. Even though we've answered a question as parents, the same question 5 times, really just needing that reassurance over and over again. And the last but not least is panic. So panic disorder is within the family of anxiety, and panic disorder is more significant than just generalized anxiety, but that panic often comes out more of a behavioral response to anxiety. So when is it a problem? Because anxiety we all have it. It's internal, it's physiological, and it's with us all. So anxiety can also help us perform really, really well. I'm sure many of us are hoping that the Phillies, their performance anxiety is going to be top-notch tonight, and Bryce Harper is going to be as locked in as he's been. But when anxiety gets to a level that is above kind of our top performance level and the ability to push us in the direction to be our best selves, that is when it becomes a problem. When that physical response impacts our thoughts negatively, so much so that we're not able to kind of keep our logical brain locked in, keep our brain in a way that we are able to kind of filter out what is real and what is real danger and what is not, and manage and regulate those emotions at that point in time. So, as you can see through the visual, anxiety is that normal reaction to stress. We all feel it at different times. Whereas somebody with an anxiety disorder, it might come out during times that we wouldn't anticipate somebody feeling anxious typically. Interfering with somebody's day-to-day life, really getting to school late often because really having trouble to get out the door on time because of anxiety, or really struggling to concentrate in during math tests because they are so worried about going to be failing that in math, but otherwise is performing very well. In terms of how to recognize, so we talked about kind of the behaviors, and then here's where we talk about some body reactions. In terms of what, as I referenced, it's physiological. It starts within our body. So that could look like the child who has frequent stomach aches, or talking about more physical symptoms that they're experiencing. And they might not be able to recognize that is anxiety, or they're really nervous about X, Y, or Z. And it's coming out physically with stomach aches or headaches, crying more, shaking, difficulty breathing. Those of us who have had panic attacks before can relate to some of those symptoms. But this is, before a panic attack would hit, some of those underlying symptoms that they might be feeling during different times. In terms of kind of recognizing anxiety in your child and thoughts, I'm gonna toss this over to Amy in a second, but I think that once we get into starting to recognize the anxiety in our thoughts, I think it's really, really important, especially depending on the age of your child. As we're getting into 7, 8, 9 years old, we start seeing a better ability to express some of that anxiety, and we're able to recognize for our child that what if thinking and some of the thoughts that Amy's going to talk about now.
Right. So we're talking about some of this what if thinking, right? You have a kid who constantly is, what if I fail this test? What if I don't make any friends? What if no one likes me? These are some of the very good examples that I think happen a lot with kids. And, they are thinking about this and they're putting it out there like that, looking for reassurance, not just reassurance from the person in front of them that they're talking to, but they're looking for internal reassurance that they're having a hard time grasping and getting into their head. And so they're, talking about this to try and engage in, how do I get from feeling this way back to, feeling like it's going to be okay. Overestimating probability, like, again, the all or nothing type of thinking, right? So I'm never going to be able to be the person that I want to be. No one is ever going to like me, or things always go wrong for me. Overestimating the consequences. So, if I don't perform the way I want on a test, it's a failure, and the consequence is going to be my parents are going to be mad at me and I'm never going to be allowed out of the house again. I'm going to be grounded forever. The teacher's going to hate me and think that I'm stupid. My friends are going to definitely think that I am, a loser. These are kinds of things that you hear a lot. We hear a lot, middle school age, even like from the 7, 8-year-old up, but the middle school age is a really big place for a lot of these kinds of things to be showing up and really verbally discussed. And you can see it in the visual there, right? It can sound like a lot of things. I feel this way. Don't leave me. I can't sleep. My legs hurt. Things that, like, my feet are bothering me is one that, like, I hear a lot from kids, and they're like, but there's nothing going on with their feet whatsoever. And the shoes are fine. But like, this is something that, again, it's their body giving them messages and them not being able to interpret how this is tied into the way that they're thinking. So how do you recognize anxiety in your child's actions? So we have kids that are on a couple different, spectrums here when it comes to this. So you have some kids who will completely shut down and avoid engaging in anything, activities, in talking to other people, in having conversations, in asking for help. You can have some really big emotions where, you accidentally rip up a piece of paper that you didn't mean to, and then you're exploding and getting incredibly angry and flipping out, or your sister takes one little thing from you that has nothing to do with anything, and all of a sudden you're screaming and yelling at your parents to do something about it. To escape, to just trying to get away, find a place to hide. So a lot of kids that will, like, sit under pieces of furniture, lay down on their floor, sit in the corner to get away from whatever is going on, or just in terms of walking away from trying to do things. That's another form of the escape, right? So like here they want to play soccer, but they're so worried about whether or not they can actually pull it off that they all of a sudden are sick when it's time for tryouts, things like that. And you can see over here in the visual, there's a lot that talks about the difficulty with sleeping. We see this a lot, whether it's falling asleep or staying asleep. And the two are very different, right? If you have somebody who's falling asleep, but they're waking up in the middle of the night and struggling to go back to sleep, some of the racing thoughts are going through their head. And so their action is to not be able to engage in going back to sleep and relax enough to do, to rest. The over planning is a really good one. It's funny that when I've people come in to do therapy, they'll be like, my kid is so on top of everything. And I had a girl last year, a 12-year-old, that, like, she had a planner but that she purchased herself, that she found, that she wanted. And it was literally filled step by step with what was going on. And when we would do sessions, she would add this into her planner. So we had to work on how the planner needs to have a place, but these things that we're doing need to have a separate place. Defiance, just refusing to do things and you not understand why. These are things that maybe your child was doing before without a problem, but now all of a sudden they don't want to do. And so you start to wonder, is there some traumatic event that occurred or something that happened that I don't know about, when really it's all of a sudden they've now starting to feel anxious about doing these things. And they have a hard time, people will say they don't tell me what's going on, but sometimes it is because they're having a really hard time knowing what's going on themselves. And so they don't really have a way in which they feel comfortable verbalizing that the fact that they don't understand it themselves. So what keeps anxiety going? So, we talk about, we are very concerned about our kids feeling comfortable, right? And wanting them to feel like they fit in and not feel pressured or challenged. So it's a real dance as a parent, right? To how much we allow them to avoid or encourage them to avoid, instead of helping them figure out how to face the challenge that's in front of them. And some of that difficulty is really honest, right? As a parent, you're seeing your child suffer and knowing that they're sad and upset. And so you are feeling uncomfortable. And so it's also really working on your own level of comfort around being able to say to your child that it's going to be okay and that they can do these things, and helping them incrementally get where they need to go. But not allowing for a situation where it's just okay to avoid it permanently. That these feelings are important to deal with, and that we want to move through being able to get where we need to go, because that's where the success is. And we want them to get there so they can feel it. Thinking errors, lack of coping skills. So not having the skills you need in order to deal with the moment or to plan for the next moment. Excessive reassuring. So you want your child to know that you believe in them and that you have confidence in what they can do, but you don't want to say it repeatedly over and over again, because that looks a little to them like you're nervous and uncomfortable, and that may escalate some of the anxiety they are experiencing. Or taking over for them. This is something that, again, sometimes it's a time crunch. This happens a lot, and we hear a lot from parents about, we're trying to get out the door to go to school, and putting on our shoes or tying our shoes. This is a thing that is really distressful for the kid. And so they're having this conversation about how they feel like they really have to just do it so we can get out the door. So measuring some of that with how do we then work on those things outside of that rushed time, so that we can really make sure that we're not giving them the impression that we're willing to take on the challenges for them so that they don't have to. So a good strategy is the calm strategy for parents. So for yourself, right? In the middle of these kinds of situations with your child, you're feeling overwhelmed yourself, right? And the anxiety for us may increase pretty heavily. So we want to be able to role model and demonstrate for them how to remain as calm as possible and how to handle the situation in the best way possible. So you want to start with catching your breath. You want to take a second, step back, take a good breath, pause and think about what's a good way to go to move forward. You want to also be able to strategize with other people. Use your support network. Groups like this are great. Also, too, just, friends or family, the school counselor, the teacher, a therapist potentially, if that's what you're thinking is really helpful. What are some suggestions or ideas that these people might have that could be helpful for you? You want to accept negative feelings. So when the child is saying negative things and feeling uncomfortable, you want to listen to that, allow them to talk it out a little bit, and say to them, I see what you're saying. Okay. So you are allowing that to come out and sit, and not trying to fix it right away. Label the emotions. So if your child is struggling with being able to explain how they're feeling, help them with the labels, help them explain that they're nervous, help them explain that they're afraid. Also, too, not bad in this situation to be able to give them examples yourself of experiences that you have had that have been similar to these, or where times where you felt worried or times where you have felt afraid, and how you handled them. That can be very helpful for a child, because children tend to look up to us and think that, you know, everything is perfect for us and that we've never had a care in the world. And so it's really nice sometimes for them to understand that, yes, you can grow up to be a person who still has struggles, and this is how you can manage them. Also, even if you use examples from when you were a child yourself, I think sometimes that helps a child too, to know that they're not the only one who's experienced something like this at this age. Model coping skills. Show them some ways that you manage stress, how you manage anxiety, whether it's breathing or taking a minute for yourself or stepping back from something, any of the things that you may use. And so those things can be really helpful when you're in a stressful situation with a child who's experiencing anxiety. So how do you support them with regulating anxiety environmentally? Can't say it enough. Number one, I have to underline it, highlight it, put it in quotes for everybody, but sleep, good food, and exercise, although hard to come by in a busy life, are incredibly important. With the right sleep, children handle things so much better. So really having good bedtime routines to help them, if they are a kid who gets overstimulated, to help them come down from that stimulation, to prepare to go to sleep, and, you know, to really get a good night's sleep. Trying to manage nutrition as best as possible. Of course, you know, everybody knows we have all the picky eaters in the world, and it's not that simple, but to do as much as you can around that is really helpful. You know, Halloween was yesterday. We all know everyone probably had an excessive amount of candy, but that's fine, right? Because that's a one-day picture of the world. But not having candy every day in excessive amounts is really helpful for not getting super hyped up. Exercise, and exercise doesn't have to be working out, right? It can be just a walk around the block with your mom or dad or the dog, and just getting out there and getting fresh air, getting some sunshine. As we're heading into the, you know, part of the year where we're getting less and less light outside, finding ways inside to get exercise. Dance offs. This is one of my favorites. I used to do with my girls all the time. Throw a song on the radio and everyone takes 5 minutes, gets up and dances. They all used to get really annoyed with me, but, you know, it was something where we would all just get moving then and sort of feel like we hadn't been sitting on the couch in the dark, you know, forever. Connecting with family and friends, animals, and nature. It's amazing how much kids respond to animals and nature in terms of, you know, it being a calming thing for them. So that kind of stuff, whether it's looking at nature videos, if you can't get out and get to be with animals, or it's, you know, things like just connecting with, I'm sorry, you threw me off there a little bit. Sorry.
I'm really sorry.
No, that's okay. I was like, wait. So building strengths and interests, avoiding overbooking activities. This is also another big one that goes with sleep, good food, and exercise. Having activities is very important. Socializing is incredibly important. But when you have too many and you're trying to split yourself between them, I think as a parent, you can feel that. If you are feeling stressed because of the number of activities that your child has, you can almost bet your money that the kid is also feeling somewhat stressed over being stretched across those kinds of activities. Leaving time to just be a kid, another thing really important. Being able to create environment in your home where there are times where we are not on electronic devices and we are just playing naturally or reading or things like that, just allowing them to experience creativity in some way is really helpful. Because again, electronic devices, blue light, this is also something that increases and heightens anxiety and causes difficulty with falling asleep. So that's pretty important to be thinking about. And building healthy exposures and hierarchy, right? So giving kids chances and opportunities to get closer to where they want to go. If making friends is a challenge, getting out there and being at the playground where just other kids are physically is a step towards getting to the right place. You know, introducing two kids together so that they can just have a short, quick conversation, next step for that. so that they understand that they can get from one place to another, and it doesn't have to be a giant jump to do that. It can be a real small incremental thing.
Which helps with those really avoidant behaviors. So that's one of the
Yes.
biggest things that we'll do in therapy around cognitive behavior therapy around anxiety is working with somebody who is able to help build in healthy exposures and healthy ways that you can feel comfortable introducing this task that's at one side and your child at the other side, and building those incremental opportunities for them to feel confident and experience that uncomfortable feeling, implement a skill to support themselves, and practice that over time as they get to that next step.
So how to support with coping skills. So helping them with the ability to calm down physically. You can see over here to the right, we have some kids doing some really fun stuff. One of my absolute favorites is yoga. I have like a whole series of, when I do therapy with kids, of yoga moves, standing ones, sitting ones, just really simple, basic things. And I really try to get kids into the fact that while they're doing them, to really get in tune with what's going on in their body at the time. And yoga is nice because of the breathing piece, right? So you really can focus on the breathing. At the same time, you're focusing on being in touch with how your body feels when it stretches in different directions or moves in different directions. Artwork, playing games, reading, these are all really great things to help you settle down and prepare. Like reading, for especially, is a great one for preparing for bedtime, being able to either be read to. And I think, you know, I can't say this enough. Even kids that know how to read themselves, older kids, you would be surprised at the number of them that love it when their parent is willing to read something to them. And so it's just soothing for them, right? To have somebody else be reading this to them while they're trying to relax. Give them the ability to talk through a situation, offer them opportunity for, you know, to sit down and just talk about how things are going. And when those things come out, just encouraging them to continue to talk to you about how they're feeling. Again, inserting for them how you can relate to how they're feeling is really helpful. Problem solve and create a plan B. So I actually just had experience with this morning with my freshman in college, who is registering for classes for the first time tomorrow as a second semester freshman. And there was a lot of panic around, what if the system crashes? What if I don't get the classes that I want? And so I said, okay, yes, those things could happen. What is your plan B? What will you do in order to deal with that situation and figure out how you're going to manage A, your emotions in the moment, but also then B, what your next steps are to get to where you really want to go. And grounding. So really getting kids to, if they're feeling super anxious and you can see it on them and they can tell you that they're feeling this too, to get them to stop what they're doing, get really in touch with what is going on, and talk about how they are okay. This is really important, really helping them stop what they're doing and have a real discussion about the fact that they are okay and that we can work through this and get through this together. Physical strategies. Be aware of the physical signs of anxiety. Healthy exposures to person, places, and things. We talked a little bit about this. Deep breathing is really great. There's a lot of good breathing exercises out there that you can use that are really simple for kids and that they can have on little pieces of paper even and just run their fingers across it, which is really helpful. Muscle relaxation. I talked a little bit about this when I'm talking about yoga. That's a part of what we're doing with that. We're stretching, but we're also feeling how we can bring our shoulders down when we're up and tight, how to feel where maybe we are feeling tightness in our body, our stomach, our backs, all kinds of things like that. Visualization, helping them see what is going on, or, you know, use visualization to go to a place that's a little bit more calm for them. The beach, thinking about what it's like to be someplace where they enjoy, a place that they enjoy and feel comfortable. And create a safe space to talk about feelings. Make sure that if they want to talk to you, that you try really hard, which I know is hard in a family situation, but to offer them a safe space where there's privacy where they feel like they can talk to you and other people are not going to be hearing what they may be saying because they may not feel comfortable with that. And here's some really great resources. Just things that Brianna and I have found have been helpful for parents that we work with, and for myself actually as a parent. It's really nice, you know, to have some things that you can just check out and see, you know, what other people are saying are helpful out there. And, you know, reaching out to your child's teacher, pediatrician, to discuss any concerns, and see what kind of recommendations they may have. Seeking support through the school counselor, a therapist, psychologist, if you feel like things are persisting and they're impacting your child's functioning, that's also really important.
And what I can do is I'm going to stop the share and I can drop those links in the chat. I know that Erica will send out the PowerPoint, but that way, if those links are helpful to somebody, you can have access to them faster. And that is all we got for today. Happy to, I know that there was, that's why I accidentally hit it. I was looking at it. I did look at some of the chats that came in and then I clicked it. So sorry about that. But I know that there was a couple that came through.
Yeah, there are a couple questions in there we can look at. If you had one or you think of one now, feel free. Usually the chat starts rolling once we get to it. But thank you for that. That was really great. Jennifer wants suggestions on getting professionals to consider anxiety as a possible cause of those behaviors that you mentioned. She says that's been a challenge with her son. His current team feels it's anxiety, but it took years to get professionals to look past the opposition and stop taking that at face value. So yeah, let's say it sounds like you've found your solution now, but I guess Jennifer's asking for others, like, how do you get people to realize that opposition can be anxiety? Or
yeah, and I can, you know, I'm happy to jump on that, and Aim, if you want to jump in, feel free. But you know, the one of the biggest ways outside of just awareness is getting professionals to chime in. So I can speak to, I've done multiple feedbacks recently where it was evident in testing, it was evident in the child's behaviors, it was evident in the self-report measures provided. And once we were able to sit together at the feedback and provide the team with the evidence, we're able to get that buy-in and awareness. I think that there are times in different systems that we are not aware that oppositional behaviors or challenging behaviors that is underlying anxiety, and it gets mislabeled as conduct problems or negative behaviors. And it is a shame, because that is not the intention. It is very clear when you're able to do testing and get a full picture of an individual, that where the underlying behavior is coming from. So my best recommendation for that is getting your child, like, as I'm sure you did, you found a team that was able to speak to it, probably with your child's school. Another opportunity is through somebody, a functional behavior assessment. At times, I think, whether that be in with the school or privately, allowing somebody that's not sometimes within the school setting, and having a second set of eyes sometimes has helped, or can be helpful. Even with anxiety, we think of FBAs or functional behavior assessments as only for negative behaviors, but you can see and look at some of the behaviors that it's obviously happening right before in interviews. When an FBA is done right, able to identify that as anxiety outside of a conduct behavioral issue. Jennifer, I hope I think you're.
Can you unmute, Jennifer?
I've actually stopped giving consent for FBAs being done with my son, because I feel like when FBAs have been done, they've gone, in with the assumption that it's pure defiance. And I've honestly pissed Magellan off. And I'm a therapist myself as well. And I'm just like, wait, okay, the behavior, it could be ADHD, it could be ODD, it could be PTSD, it could be anxiety. And what data are you collecting?
Right.
To rule in, or it could be see all the above, because my kids also like going for that answer as well. And it affects treatment. So like they have it down, like at Magellan, like I won't give consent. I think for that reason, like I think you're right. If it's done well.
When it's done
And
well,
it's done with someone going
unbiased
in,
eyes.
knowing that it could be any of these possibilities, and what assessments do we need to do to rule them in or out?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, but and I guess maybe that's more my question, is how do you get them to consider all the possibilities, and particularly the school, because honestly it started with the school.
I think it's
And
real. I
then-
will say this. I think, you know, when you're looking at the difference between the school and mental health trained, you know, people that are mental health trained,
Mhm.
there's some lack of experience with anxiety as oppositional, you know, and so lack of experience and knowledge. I mean, when you go to graduate school, even as a therapist, you're not necessarily getting all of it laid out for you, that this is what it could be. And like
Right.
Brianna said, I think it really takes a very, you know, it takes skilled individuals to be able to take the pieces and really examine the pieces for what they are, and how they're fitting in with other things. You know, because we mentioned a lot of things tonight, right? Physical things, behavioral things, thoughts things, and some of that, putting that together is really a part of it. And I will say, I think CBT training, honestly, and I'm speaking even from the mental health side, right, where the continuum of training for a therapist is pretty wide, and so having some good background in cognitive behavioral therapy can be really helpful, especially around the issue of anxiety. And so when you've had that kind of training, you know, you're looking at a variety of things. And also being honest. I mean, I know Brianna would agree with this, is sometimes being prepared to say, well, this is what the assessments are looking like, but we're on the borderline of this. And so it does look a little bit like I'm not sure 100%. I mean, like being open to the fact that the answer may not be obvious.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in terms of, you know, what type of assessment, I think when you're talking about when you're the way that you're also presenting and needing to look at the full child, you need, like, the team needs to be willing to look at the full child, from cognitive achievement, executive functioning, looking, when we're doing a self-report, we're not going to do a self-report and just code and score for, you know, something that's going to look at just emotional disturbance concerns, but looking at like a BASC or something that's going to give a fuller picture, not just from the one teacher, but from the school counselor, from other teachers who's had him or her, from the parent. So it's really making sure and trying to, and I know that's the struggle, as Amy's reference, is getting the school team to be willing to come to the table. And I would imagine that if your child's current team it sounds like it's a really positive team, saying to them, can we coordinate on what that might look like, what assessments we need to make sure that if he was going to get reevaluated or evaluated at a school within the school setting, that we can ask to see if they would be willing to include. Right.
No, that makes sense. I think that's where my other question comes in, is almost like, what should we document now with the team that knows him? And they all say the same thing. He comes in presenting as ODD, and once he feels safe, he presents as a very highly anxious, child. And that's been his very consistent pattern. And the people who get past that initial impression do very well with him. And those who don't, it turns into a power struggle and makes things worse. And it's like it's one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think if the question is, how do I get my school to hear what the current team who's been successful with him is, you're going to want to make sure that it's both qualitative and quantitative, as well as coordination from those team members, and trying to make sure that if they're willing or able to be a part of those conversations, that they are, because kids can, unfortunately, as we know, get mislabeled in a school setting, fairly. To make sure that whatever this team is currently doing, that you're memorializing in written documentation, so that if you do change teams or things happen differently over the course of time, which
therapist leaves, like we've had that therapist leave unexpectedly,
then you have that information memorialized in some format. I mean, I think that's really important as well. I think a lot of times the memorialization of the work a team is doing is often in a health record. And as a parent, I think it's really important to make sure you get copies of these things that are memorialized so that you are prepared for if there's a shift or you make a decision to go with another organization, that you have that memorialized so that you don't start from scratch again in that particular way.
No, that's a good point. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to hijack for a second, and I can because of my thing, right? Could a child, let's say a kid has a high level of anxiety, particularly in an assessment or testing scenario, can they mask that for like an hour long? Like that's the challenge with my son. He'll like hold it together for an evaluator who's going to see him one time for 1 hour, but that's not how he performs all day long when left to work independently. So everyone's like, no, we don't see it. Is that like a common thing that kids with anxiety can do?
Yes, that can happen. That can happen. Or you can see it if you can see it across, oftentimes if you're doing testing, you're doing multiple days of testing. It's not like a 1 hour once and done type of thing. And you're utilizing multiple measures that's looking at different things, but you can sometimes look at different differences and poke holes as an evaluator that I'm looking for, particularly if the question is anxiety, around initiation, time things, and seeing different things. So sometimes you're able to pick it up, but there's sometimes the child can really keep it together. And then I'm getting on the phone with school and saying, let's talk about what those who are working with him or her, what are you seeing and what is going on? What are some of the behaviors that are happening before the X class or before the test is given? What is happening after? What is the engagement level looking like? And almost doing that clinical interview also outside of the testing window.
So I think
as well as I would say, Erica, the other piece is, in any evaluation, we better be documenting and coordinating outside of just the behavior, just the testing outcomes, but looking at the behavior observations. And more often than not, you can see something somewhere in one of those areas. But go ahead, Aim, sorry.
So I want to stress something that Brianna's talking about that I think is really important for parents, is to really ask, if your child is going to be evaluated, to ask the evaluator what is the process by which they're going to do the evaluation. Because Brianna mentioned testing in 2 different days. Not everyone does that. Observations or collection of particular data. You want to know if you're going to go to an evaluator and have them do an evaluation, you want to ask their process. You want to know what that process looks like. And you want to know that they are pulling from a variety of different areas, right? And that they're collaborating with the school. And I'm going to just lay this out. I mean, sometimes you will have evaluators who will just ask you as the parent to get information from the school. I think whenever you can, if you're going to be paying, especially if you're paying privately for an evaluation, I think you want to know that the evaluator is going to tell you what they are going to do to engage the team that you have going on in their process. Because I think that's kind of important. I think it's important that the evaluator be having some communication with the school, even if it's an email situation or a conversation that says, can you do these assessments, as a part of what I'm doing, and this is why I'm asking you to do this, because again, that's the person who's making the final decision, and so having their engagement with the people, I think, matters quite a bit.
Got it. Awesome. All right. Sorry I hijacked because there's 10 questions now in the chat. Okay. So Megan said, similar to Jennifer, the first question we had, my son's 6 years old. We had concerns at 2.5. No professionals identified it as anxiety. We finally got a diagnosis at 4.5 years old, but we still have not found an effective therapist because no one works with kids this young for anxiety and OCD. So I don't think you mentioned how young you go. And if that's too young, I guess, can someone contact you for recommendations or resources?
Yeah. No, typically, like our youngest is usually 4. That's usually as young as we start. In terms of places, yes, I mean, that's definitely been an issue for everybody. I do think there's a lot of factors that play in, but I'll put mine and Amy's email on here. I mean, obviously, you can contact us, but we're also really attuned to the areas, like, both Amy being in community mental health, and in tune to a lot of networks, as well as us both in Delaware County and Montgomery County. So if it's clearly, we don't expect everybody to run to us, and that's not what we're here to talk about, but we are here to help connect. So if, Megan, if you're struggling to find somewhere, there's a lot of different avenues that we can talk through, from EAPs to insurance to practices that we might have connections to see what availability looks like for them and age groups, and connections that we could look at. So feel free to use us as a resource to get yes. where we need to go.
Always happy to talk to people. Doesn't mean you have to come here. Conversation is free.
We appreciate you. All right. Steph said she's a BCBA who's done those FBAs, and she agrees with what we were saying before. So to you, Jennifer, she said you need the right kind of BCBA. Okay. And then Brianna, you put if everyone
I've been dropping some of the links in there.
Some of the links of the resources at the end are in there. So Marie says, both my 9-year-old homeschooled, 13-year-old started public school this year, old, have diagnoses of anxiety. We can't seem to find any local therapists who take our personal insurance or Medicaid. Nemours just dropped their telehealth license with PA. I didn't know that. Where do you go for help in today's environment?
This is very challenging for everyone. And I'll be honest, neither Brianna nor I have a lot of good answers for this, but we have some really good knowledge of why the problem is happening. And I think that's important for you to know too. I think, I can't say enough about educating legislators that you're the constituents of, about the needs for more mental health providers under insurance. The ones that are currently taking insurance are booked, and a lot of people have chosen not to take insurance anymore because for a couple of reasons. One is the rate of reimbursement for most of the commercial insurances, and Medicaid especially, is not great. And people that are professional therapists are feeling discouraged from being able to make a living based on what the contracted rates are. And in some cases, it's not just the rates, it's the what you have to do to file claims and get the there's just a lot of bureaucracy involved that pushes down in this situation. But again, Brianna and I do know a lot of practices that do take insurance, and so we can help people in whatever way we can if they need some help trying to find that. And
I'm also going to just, if Amy's point, I'm going to talk over her for a second. Psychology Today is we're used to it. We worked together for long enough. Is a good avenue in terms of just being able, you can plug your insurance in there as a filter if you're looking to use insurance to try to see what providers are active. So other than going to your insurers and saying, I need a list of in-network providers, Psychology Today is another outlet to search around. It is fairly user-friendly and it has decent filters. So that's another option for those looking for specific insurances.
And depending on your distress tolerance, really pushing your insurance. If they're telling you this person, and they don't have openings, and you have a therapist that you think would be appropriate, you can push your insurance company to pay you for out-of-network benefits if they cannot provide you with an available therapist within their network.
That's a great tip. Do you know people that have been successful with that?
I do know of a couple of people that have been successful with doing that. I'm going to be frank about it, right? It's not one phone call.
Right.
It's about being able to show evidence that you've called these places, they've told you they do not have anyone available, but you have found someone that is available and that you believe is appropriate. And as long as they're licensed, because that's important, you can push them to then pay you out of network for that.
Okay.
But it's work.
You never know if you weren't told.
People get tired and you get frustrated, and I don't blame you, but so that's just another possible avenue. Again, not the easiest.
Okay, great. Steph would love to hear your thoughts on childhood anxiety on medication.
Yes.
Yeah.
We definitely have thoughts, for sure.
A lot of thoughts.
There is times where medication can really be effective in conjunction with therapy. That is usually not mine or Amy's first line of our go-to. We are more conservative, I would say, in relation to medication. However, specific, let's say we've been in therapy and we're really, and the child is, we are engaging in, particularly, let's say CBT, because that's one of the number one evidence-based therapies for anxiety for children, but really working through, and we are still seeing more panic-like symptoms, serious, significant physiological symptoms of anxiety that is then impacting their ability to practice and engage in the coping skills and engage in the actual therapeutic process in the moment outside of the therapy room. There are times in those instances where we may have a conversation with the family to say, to consult with a CRMP, a psychiatrist, or the family practitioner around getting some support for medication to get that kind of buffer support.
And I will interrupt Brianna.
I mean, I know you would.
My turn. I want to interrupt Brianna to just say this. In terms of the primary care physician, my belief is the younger the child, the better to use the psychiatrist or CRMP avenue. Primary care physicians do have some training in this area. However, it is geared towards older children, adolescents, young adults, and adults, not really the younger child. And when you're dealing with a younger child, you're going to want somebody with some good expertise, because with changing development, with physical changes and so forth, there may need to be tweaking or changes that occur on a more regular basis because of that.
And then can you just reference younger child for everybody?
I'm sorry. Yeah, for me, I think under 12.
Yeah.
I really do. I think anyone under 12, we really should be using a psychiatrist or a certified registered nurse practitioner that's trained in psychiatric, child psychiatric area, family psychiatric, I think they call it, because the additional attention is important. And the detail that could be going into this, because again, it's not always the first medication that you start that actually hits what you need. And again, with growing, you could be on a dosage doing really well, and then all of a sudden you're having a shift, and it could be because of that, or it could be because of chemical changing that means we need a different medication. And I just think you want the expertise. It's very important.
And one of the other things, the only other comment I would say about medication and anxiety is that, if a parent is deciding to go in that route for reasons that we just referenced, it is not, and I think it's important to remember, it is not a decision that it is a lifelong decision. It could be, right? But that does not mean it is going to be. It really is very dependent on the severity of the symptoms, how the medication impacts it, and if it gives the ability for that individual to get what they need to be able to practice, gain the confidence, kind of rewire some of the ways that they have had some of those cognitive distortions that Amy had referenced, and gain that skill to be able to navigate. There are times where medication management is needed for a longer duration, and there's time that it's not. So it really is important to know that it really is very individualized.
And I always say this, really important to hear this, the initial evaluation is the most important piece. So if you're not feeling sold, like you're sitting here saying to yourself, I don't know, medication, 9 years old, 10 years old, I don't know, it seems extreme. Never hurts to go do the evaluation with the psychiatrist and hear what their professional opinion is, what they have to say. You can walk away and never start medication, but that evaluation gives you a window into some more information and some education that you did not have before you did it.
Good point. Awesome. I think we're close to wrapping up. So if anyone has any last questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. Let me know if I skipped any. I know you're not here to promote yourselves, but can you just talk a little bit, since you were so generous with your time, about the different types of services you offer? Obviously, you work with kids one-on-one, but I know you have group stuff. I know you have behavior coaching or behavior evaluations, parent coaching, and it sounds like you do evaluations that are needed for school. And I know that's a hot topic.
Yeah, so we actually we work with children and adults, families, couples. We have a team of clinicians. We're out in Plymouth meeting, and we do offer virtual, but oftentimes we, for our younger guys or our children, we're right here. Amy and I are still in our offices now, doing in-person work. In terms of, we do individual, as Erica referenced, we also do groups. So every season we change our group. So we just ran actually an anxiety-based Confident Me group. We have executive functioning groups. We actually have teacher groups. So we run groups and we put them out every season. Our winter group should be coming out in the next few weeks. In terms of individual groups, I'm a licensed psychologist. I do evaluations. Amy and I partner in those, where we are, depending on the question, from autism to ADHD to anxiety to I just don't know. And I think that there's something going on, and really looking at the individual as a whole. We do children and adult evaluations.
We do a lot of parent coaching. I mean, I think this is an important piece. A lot of times people will say, my child needs this, and they bring them in for therapy. And sometimes we recommend we do some parent sessions around how the parent can support the child with what's going on. Co-parenting, parents that are separated or divorced but want to do a better job of co-parenting with their child who has different needs. And that can be, that can be pretty involved, but it's really great when you can get somebody from a place where we're not feeling so great about each other to a place where we can manage to raise our child together in a positive way when they're having different problems that are going on.
For sure. Awesome. That sounds really comprehensive. Okay. So Steph, thank you for your response, but she also wants to play devil's advocate, which is a favorite hobby of mine as well. Why not be quicker to try medication when a child has been struggling? What are the side effects or drawbacks that make you medication shy?
I think I love it. I love it.
Pick a number from 1 to 10.
Yeah,
I'm going. So I'm going to tell you from my perspective, there are so many things going on with anxiety, and I'm going to use the pandemic as one of them. The pandemic caused a lot of uncertainty in everyone's life, uncertainty with parents, which was modeled then to children who then felt very uncertain themselves. And I would absolutely not ever want to begin with medication when I have a child coming in if I don't know the whole story around what is going on with their anxiety. Also, because if you can do 2 or 3 sessions and get a better estimation of whether or not you believe the child can use some strategies to bring their anxiety down, and we have them do a lot of rating and journaling, just depending on the kids, and you see an improvement, an initial, drop, that's a sign that more than likely the work that we're going to do with CBT is going to be really effective. And if their physical symptoms are not so overwhelming that they are like more in the panic area, which Brianna mentioned before, right? When we're more in the panic area, that is where I think we're really looking at the possible effectiveness of medication, because what we also don't want to happen is we don't want a child to come to therapy, be working very hard and not feel any success whatsoever. And so that's where I think we start to cross over into the medication. I also will say, I think we have to be really, again, we're trained as therapists, right? So I'm going to say from our perspective that the other thing I think you want to be careful of is thinking of medication as a fix for what will definitely need to be medication and working on developing coping skills and strategies.
Yeah. Great answer, I think. Okay, I think she said thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
think we can probably wrap it up there. I don't see anything else in there. Just a quick note for the parents. So if you didn't watch the previous live, that was with an occupational therapist, and we did touch on anxiety and how it can be driven by the body more so than the brain. And she talked about how occupational therapy can help. That's the retained reflexes chat, and that is in the group. So check that out if your kiddo has anxiety. I'm sure they do, or you wouldn't be here. And then Amy talked a lot about sleep, and I appreciate that because, of course, that's what I do. But our live next week is going to be with a sleep coach who does work with all kinds of kiddos, delays, disabilities, neurotypical kids, to help us figure out how we can help these anxious kids get some sleep. So definitely check that one out if you're having trouble with that. And I think that is everything I wanted to say. I'm sorry you're still in your offices at night, but we are all super, super appreciative
All good.
that you were willing to take this time for us. These parents are all trying so hard, like we all are, and they're so grateful for people that can show up and give us information and answer these questions. And I'm sure some of them will be reaching out to you, but it's great to know what you do and where you are.
Yep.
And thank you so much for your time and your expertise.
Thank you, everybody. It was great to be here.
Yeah, and
Awesome.
thank you for doing this. I mean, I think this is great what you're doing here. And I was just sitting here thinking, how do I recommend parents? I know I'm going to be saying that. How do we recommend parents to get involved in that? I mean,
right? I know.
Yeah.
I always laugh because I really started this just so I'd have a few friends to talk to that were like having issues with the school, and it just like exploded, and it showed me like, A, I'm not alone, which is great, but B, like, wait, we need a way to like bring everybody together and disperse information and resources. So it's been interesting. But yeah, everyone is very, very appreciative, and that of course makes it all worth it, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, I'll let everybody get back to the Phillies game. I'm sure some people were missing because they pitched that instead, but thank you guys for showing up. I hope it was helpful and useful, and I'm sure we'll have you back again.
Great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.